which is important, and stress upon the important facts. Physics, as you know, is a very important component of our knowledge of echocardiography. And whenever we do the imaging to get the optimal image, best possible image, we need to know the physics. And Prabhu Shankar is also there. I invite him for this meeting. I request him to make comments at the end. And we will go on with the session. Dr. Sushil Kamath, please carry on. Share your screen and
Yes, sir. I'll be sharing the screen, sir.
yeah.
Is my screen visible, sir?
Yeah, it's visible.
Yes, sir. So good morning, respected teachers, colleagues, students, and my dear friends. I am Dr. Sushmit Kamath, Junior Consultant Cardiac Anesthesiology from Goa Medical College. And I would like to thank Dr. Muralidhar sir and Forum of Cardiac Anesthesiologists to give me this opportunity to speak on physics in echocardiography and image optimization. As we all know, physics is a very basic topic in echocardiography. It is usually overlooked by students, but we need a very good foundation of physics to have to do a proper echocardiography. Echocardiography generates dynamic images of the heart from reflections of transmitted ultrasound. There is an ultrasound probe or a transducer which transmits ultrasound waves and then records the time delay for each returning reflection. And based on the calculation of this time delay, it locates the cardiac structures and creates an image map. The concept behind echocardiography was well known even in the 1700s, but it was only on 29th October 1953 when Dr. Inge Adler and Karl Hertz first demonstrated the moving pictures of the heart. This to the left is Dr. Inge Adler, who is known as the father of echocardiography. And this was the machine which they first used to demonstrate the moving pictures of the heart. As far as transesophageal echo is concerned, it was invented by Dr. Leon Franzen from Chicago in 1974 and then published it around 2 years later in 1976. So what is exactly ultrasound? Ultrasound waves are nothing but sound waves with a frequency higher than the normal audible range. A human ear can hear sound waves from frequencies from 20 to 20,000 hertz. So anything which is above this 20,000 hertz is known as ultrasound. In medical ultrasound, the frequencies usually used are from 1 to 18 megahertz, and this frequency is usually mentioned on the ultrasound transducer. In case of transesophageal echo, it is usually around 2 to 7 or 2 to 8 megahertz. Just like sound waves, ultrasound also has the same physical properties as sound waves, such as amplitude, wavelength, frequency, and propagation velocity. The ultrasound waves move in a alternating fashion of compression and rarefactions and can be drawn as a sine wave curve. The height of this sine wave is known as the amplitude, which is measured. It's a measure of the loudness and power of the ultrasound wave. It is measured in decibels, and the intensity is usually directly proportional to the square of amplitude. The distance between two sine waves is known as the wavelength. It is measured in millimeters, and it is inversely proportional to the frequency, which is nothing but the number of cycles per second and measured in hertz. This is the relationship between wavelength and frequency. They are inversely proportional to each other, and they can be calculated that wavelength is equal to the speed of ultrasound in the particular medium divided by the frequency. So in case of soft tissue, this propagation velocity is around 1500. So we get this equation to calculate the wavelength or the frequency. This is the wavelength for the normal frequencies which we use in medical ultrasound and transesophageal echo. The propagation velocity is the velocity with which the ultrasound waves traverse a particular medium. It depends on the density and stiffness of that particular medium. For example, a very dense and stiff medium such as bone transmits ultrasound very well at a velocity of almost 4000 meter per second. But something like a air or lung tissue transmits, which is not very dense, which soft, transmits it at a very low velocity of 330 meter per second. Usually what we encounter is soft tissue in transesophageal echo. So the velocity for soft tissue is 1540 for meter per second. So when the ultrasound waves move from the transducer and fall on a particular tissue, it interacts with the tissue in the one of the following manners. Either these waves can get reflected, either they can get refracted, they get scattered, or they get attenuated. I'll just move on to each of these interactions in detail. So when the ultrasound waves move from the transducer in a uniform medium, they propagate in a straight line until they meet another particular tissue or medium which has a different acoustic property compared to the previous one. So when they fall on this particular medium, either they can get reflected back or they can move in a different direction, causing refraction. So how does it behave depends on the angle at which these ultrasound waves fall on that particular structure. If this particular structure is lying perpendicular to the ultrasound waves, then most of these waves get transmitted back, leading to a formation of a good echo image. Whereas if this particular structure is at an angle, then only some of the waves get transmitted back, whereas some get refracted, and this leads to a poor echo image. So this brings us to the first rule of image optimization in 2D echo, is that whenever we want to see a particular structure, that is the structure of interest, we should make sure that we select a window or a view wherein the ultrasound beam is lying perpendicular to that particular structure of interest. I will give following example in the next slide. And just to mention that whenever these ultrasound waves fall on irregular surfaces such as clumped RBCs, they get scattered. They neither get reflected or refracted, but the phenomenon which occurs is scattering. If the received ultrasound waves are low in quantity, then this will lead to a poor quality image and echo dropout. So this is a 2D echo image. Suppose our structure of interest which we want to study is the subvalvular apparatus. And if we are trying to see it in this image, which is a mid-esophageal 4-chamber view. So in this image, we are not able to visualize the subvalvular apparatus. That is because the structure of interest lies parallel to the ultrasound beam. Hence, it is not visualized in this view. Hence, we need to select a transesophageal echo view wherein that particular structure will lie perpendicular to the ultrasound beam. For example, we'll have to select a transgastric 2-chamber view. In this view, as the ultrasound beam and subvalvular apparatus are perpendicular to each other. Hence, this is the best view to visualize that particular structure, that is the subvalvular apparatus. This is an image to have an example of scattering. In case of a severe MS due to clumped RBCs, there is a scattering occurring in the left atrium, leading to a spontaneous echo contrast or a smoky LA. The last interaction that ultrasound waves can have with a particular tissue is attenuation. Attenuation is nothing but the loss of intensity of the ultrasound waves, and this usually happens due to either dispersion or absorption. Dispersion is the phenomenon wherein the ultrasound waves diverges in the far field, leading to loss of intensity. So any ultrasound beam has two components in its beam. It either has a near field and a far field. So as these ultrasound waves move from the near field to far field, they get attenuated and diverged. Hence, this brings us to the second rule of image optimization, is that if we want to see a particular structure of interest, we should make sure that it lies in the near field, because if that particular structure lies in the far field, then the echoes returning from there will be attenuated and of poor quality. Absorption also leads to attenuation, and that is when the frictional forces convert the ultrasound to heat energy. Hence, to decrease attenuation and to reduce it, we need to use lower frequency probes, and we have to select a window where the structure of interest is very close to the probe so that it lies in the near field. Now, something about the ultrasound transducer. The ultrasound transducer contains a electrical crystal, which is nothing but polarized molecules trapped within a matrix. Ultrasound is based on the principle of piezoelectricity, wherein when the electric current is acted upon this piezoelectric crystal, the polarized molecules vibrate, producing ultrasound waves. Similarly, when the returning ultrasound waves fall on these polarized molecules, they again vibrate, converting these ultrasound waves into electrical energy from where we get the image. Hence, the same piezoelectric crystal can function as a transmitter as well as a receiver for the ultrasound waves. Along with the piezoelectric crystal, ultrasound transducer also has the following components. It has electrodes, backing plate, insulation, and a faceplate. So the electrodes conduct electrical energy and stimulate the crystal and record voltage from the returning echoes. The backing material dampens the vibrations of the crystal, and insulation prevents any unwanted vibrations from getting picked up. Also, there'll be a faceplate which optimizes acoustic contact with the particular surface, whether it is the esophagus or the body surface. So this is how a transesophageal transducer looks from outside, but it usually has various components inside, which include the crystal and the electrodes. So when the ultrasound beam is produced from this transducer, it, as already said, it has two zones. It has a near field, which is known as the Fresnel zone, and a far field, which is known as Fraunhofer zone. Whatever structure lies in the near field is imaged the best. Hence, the narrow beam is always preferred because a narrow beam has a longer near field and a less divergent far field. And narrow beam also helps to improve the resolution, increase the intensity of returning echoes, and reduces artifact. Hence, to narrow a beam, we have to use large transducers with high frequency so that we get a much narrower beam and a more near field. As already said, we have to select a window where the particular structure lies in the near field, but it is not always possible. Sometimes we cannot get a view where that structure is in the near field. Sometimes it is present in the far field. So in that case, we can use a modality known as focusing, which further helps to narrow the beam and make sure that that particular structure comes to lie between the and in the focal zone between the near field and the far field. So it is usually a dial along with depth and focus on the ultrasound machine, which helps to us to focus the ultrasound waves on that particular structure, whichever we want to image the best. Focusing is done by adding a concave shape in a crystal or adding an acoustic lens in front of the piezoelectric crystal, or in the today's modern day machines, it is focusing is done by using something known as a phased array transducer. In case of phased array, what it actually means is that instead of having a single crystal, there is a linear array of crystals side by side. And instead of activating all of them at once, we activate the crystals at one end before the ones in the center. So instead of the wave moving in a vertical fashion, it moves in a direction towards a particular focus or a particular target, which we can set by moving the dial. For example, in this image, this is the focus point. So when we rotate that, we select the focus from the pressing the center of this dial and rotate it, this focal point can move along the sector. So if we move it even in the far field, that particular structure, that area will be visualized the best as it will come to lie at the focal point, and the resolution will be best at that point. So that brings us to the next modality, that is resolution. Resolution is basically the ability of the ultrasound to distinguish two separate points as two separate. So if there are two structures which are lying in your field, they should be detected as two separate objects and not as one. So based on how these two structures lie to the ultrasound beam, the resolution can either be axial, lateral, or elevational. So when the two structures lie along the path of the ultrasound beam, this is known as axial resolution. Axial resolution depends on the wavelength and frequency of the ultrasound beam. So to improve axial resolution, we should ideally increase the frequency. But while increasing the frequency, this comes as a trade-off because higher frequencies will have a less penetration. So there is a limit to which we can increase the axial resolution. As far as lateral and elevational resolution is concerned, lateral resolution is when these two structures lie horizontal to the ultrasound beam, and elevational is when these two structures lie at a vertical to the ultrasound beam. As far as temporal resolution is concerned, it is related to the frame rate, and I'll come to it a bit later. So lateral and elevational resolution can be increased by increasing the near field. So when resolution is better in the near field and it decreases in the far field, so we can lengthen the near field by the same components which we have already spoken about, by using a higher transducer frequency and a larger transducer radius. Also by using focusing. When we use focusing, it improves the lateral and elevational resolution at that particular focal point which we select. Hence, to optimize resolution, it's preferable to position a transducer with a high frequency close to the target of interest, which will optimize both lateral as well as elevational resolution. So till now, as far as image optimization is concerned, we have discussed 3 points. One is that we should select a view where the structure is perpendicular to what we want to image. Secondly is we have to use the window where the particular structure is closest to the ultrasound probe. And the third is we need to use focusing so that even though the structure is slightly far, we use focusing to image it better and improve the resolution at that point. So now how is this information which is got displayed? There are various display formats. The oldest one, the starting mode was A mode, which was the amplitude mode, wherein the amplitude of the returning echoes was plotted as spikes. The more the amplitude, there was a larger spike. This gave way to the B mode. In B mode or the brightness mode, instead of vertical spikes, pixels of various varying brightness were used to denote the amplitude. So higher amplitude was used for a brighter pixel was used in that place. So today the modes which we use, that is 2D mode and M mode, are actually derived from the B mode. So in case of the M mode or the motion mode, we basically add temporal information by displaying a series of collected B mode images at a very high frame rate of almost 2000 per second. It gives us a one-dimensional ice-pick view through the heart, and it is used for superior display of dynamic motion and axial resolution. This M mode is the best view for examining timing of cardiac events displayed along with the ECG. It also helps us to measure the various dimensions and the walls and calculate the EF according to the T-Coles method. 2D echocardiography is the most commonly used mode. In this mode, we direct ultrasound pulses across a sector of cardiac anatomy. So the B mode data is got from the first pulse, then the next pulse is directed to the side of it until an entire sector of around 30 to 90 degrees has been scanned. Then the entire process is repeated to update the image and capture motion. The pulse repetition frequency is the rate at which these ultrasound pulses are transmitted per second. So each image created by a sector scan is known as a frame. And each frame has almost 100 to 200 scan lines. The number of frames that are recorded in a particular second is known as frame rate, and this depends on the sector depth as well as the sector width. So frame rate is directly dependent on the temporal resolution. To improve the temporal resolution, we should either reduce the sector depth, just how much we want to see the particular structure, and we have to reduce the sector width so that the number of scan lines processed are less. So this is a particular example. To improve temporal resolution, we decrease the sector width just to see the particular, if we want to see the aortic valve. Instead of seeing the entire sector, we decrease the width so that the resolution of that particular structure increases. Similarly, we have to reduce the depth. For example, if we want to see the left ventricular cavity, this setting of depth is very high. So we reduce it so that the resolution, the temporal resolution increases. So this brings us to the optimization of image. We have already learned that we need to select a depth which is just beyond the structure, use focusing to focus on that particular structure of interest, decrease the sector size to allow higher frame rates, and finally we have to set the correct gain setting. So gain is nothing but a setting which increases the amplitude of the electrical signal generated by the returning ultrasounds. It should be adjusted just such that we get a gray scale ranging from wherein the low amplitude is seen as dark gray and high amplitude is seen as white signals. For example, this is a poorly set gain where the gain is very low, and in this case the gain settings are very high, hence the image is looking very hazy. In the third image, this is the ideal gain setting which we should keep. So one of the clue is to eliminate the operating room lights or the OPD lights so that which prevents us from using a very high gain setting. There are two other types of gain settings. One is time gain compensation, which helps us to selectively adjust the gain setting at every depth of the sector. It helps us to amplify weaker signals returning from the far field. Hence, these controls are set at a lower degree for a near field, and they are set at a higher for a far field. Similarly, lateral gain compensation helps us to improve the resolution of tissues side by side. It helps to amplify the weaker signals to a greater extent and ensure uniform brightness across the entire sector. Lateral gain compensation is usually used for detection of endocardial borders when we use the Simpson's method for ejection fraction calculation. Now coming to Doppler physics in echocardiography. So till now, using 2D and M mode, we have studied the anatomy. We are able to see the anatomy of the heart and we are able to see the motion. But using 2D and M mode, we are not able to see the direction and velocity of moving blood. Hence, we apply Doppler principles, physics of Doppler principles to echocardiography so that we can detect the direction and velocity of moving blood. The Doppler effect was first described by Christian Doppler in 1842, which says that an observer perceives a change in wavelength or frequency if the source of the sound or light moves relative to them. This principle is applied in echocardiography, where we examine the change in frequency of ultrasound, which is reflected from the moving RBCs. For example, the ultrasound transducer transmits a particular frequency, and if the RBCs are not moving, then they will be reflected back with the same frequency. Hence, the difference in the two frequencies will be zero, which is known as the Doppler shift. Whereas if the blood flow is towards the ultrasound probe, then the returning frequencies will be higher than the transmitted, and this will detect the direction of the flow. Similarly, if it's the opposite, the flow is going away from the transducer, then the returning frequency will be lesser than the transmitted frequency. Hence, based on this Doppler shift, we'll be able to detect the direction of the blood flow. This can be explained based on the analogy with an ambulance with a siren. For example, if the ambulance with a siren is moving towards you, we will find that the volume is increasing as it moves towards you. Whereas as the ambulance is moving away, the volume will decrease. But actually, the volume of the siren remains the same. It is just because it is moving relative to you, we feel that the frequency or the volume has increased or decreased. So once we know the direction, next we have to know the velocity of this blood flow. To know the velocity, we have to convert the Doppler principle into a mathematical equation wherein the frequency difference between the transmitted and reflected Dopplers is directly proportional to the velocity and cos of the angle. This angle is the angle made by the Doppler beam with the blood flow. So as cos of 0 is 1, when the particular beam is exactly parallel with the blood flow, we will get the best calculation of the velocity. Whereas if this angle is 90, that is the Doppler beam is perpendicular to the blood flow, cos of 90 will be 0 and the equation will become 0 and will not be able to appreciate any velocity or flow through the particular structure. Hence, this is directly opposite to the 2D image. In 2D image, we need to get a view where the particular structure is perpendicular to the beam, whereas in case of Doppler, to interrogate a particular flow, we have to select a view wherein the Doppler beam lies exactly parallel to the blood flow. This angle has to be as closer to 0 as possible, because even if it changes by 10 degrees, there is a 8% error which comes in the velocity. And as it increases, the percentage of error keeps on increasing. So it will be difficult to distinguish between maybe a mild valvular lesion and a moderate or severe based on this error. So now, if we want to interrogate the flow through the aortic valve, if we select the mid-esophageal short axis view, which is the view which is used for the anatomy of the valve, we will get a very poor flow through the aortic valve, or will not be able to get the better Doppler calculation. So for a flow through the aortic valve, we need to use the deep transgastric view and align the Doppler beam exactly through the aortic valve so that we can appreciate a proper flow through the aortic valve. Now this data which we get back from Doppler can either be presented in two ways. One is audible broadcast, wherein the difference between this transmitted and reflected frequency usually lies in an audible range. So the software amplifies and broadcasts this signal to the operator so that based on the loudness and pitch of this audible broadcast, we can precisely position the Doppler beam. Also, based on the texture and pitch of this audible sound, we can get an idea whether the valvular lesion is severe or mild. For example, in this particular, I hope we can see the audio. In this particular short axis view, we are hardly getting any audible broadcast because the beam is almost parallel to is perpendicular to the flow through the aortic. As we select the correct view and go deep transgastric, in the case of normal aortic valve, this is how we get the aortic valve. So based on the pitch, we can align the Doppler beam adequately. Similarly, in case of a severe aortic stenosis, we get a very harsh audible broadcast. Just based on the pitch and texture, we can get to know that this is not a normal. The other way this Doppler data is presented to us is based on a spectral display in which the Doppler data is plotted as a time velocity plot. Frequencies with greater amplitude are marked with brighter pixels, and high quality signals result in a clean envelope with sharply demarcated borders and bright pixels and clear peaks. So we can use this to calculate VTI or maximum frequency, maximum velocity and pressure gradient. There are various Doppler techniques such as pulse wave Doppler, continuous wave Doppler, and color flow mapping. In pulse wave Doppler, a single crystal is used as an emitter and receiver. We select a particular sample volume where the particular structure has to be interrogated using Doppler, and signals associated with this particular depth or location are evaluated. This is how a pulse wave Doppler looks with clear envelopes. And if we are in this case, we are interrogating the transmitral velocity flow. So we place the sample volume just in between the mitral valve leaflets. Since pulse wave Doppler uses a repeated pattern of ultrasound transmission and reception, it has to go to that particular sample volume and come back. It has a limited frequency which it can measure. This is known as the Nyquist limit. Any velocity which lies above this limit will be not be accurate, and it will lead to ambiguous aliasing. Any Doppler shift which lies above this Nyquist limit, the analysis of the returning signal becomes ambiguous, which is known as aliasing, and the velocity becomes indeterminate. For example, we can use the clock analogy to explain the aliasing phenomenon. The normal clock hand is moving in a clockwise direction as long as we monitor it every 15 minutes. But if we start monitoring it slowly, we monitor it only every 40 minutes, then the clock hand will look as if it is moving anti-clockwise, whereas it is actually moving clockwise. On a spectral display, this aliasing is seen as wraparound. So this is how it is seen on spectral display. Instead of getting the Doppler on one side, we get a wraparound. This is because of aliasing. So along with the clock analogy, we can understand even based on a wagon wheel analogy. See, this is a wagon wheel. It is moving in an anti-clockwise direction as long as it is moving at a very slow speed. But when it moves at a very high speed, even our eyes have a particular pulse repetition frequency. So as the speed increases, even our eyes, it feels like it is moving in the opposite direction to exactly which it is moving. So as the speed increases, we will feel that this is moving clockwise instead of anti-clockwise. So right here, as the speed has increased, we are feeling that this direction of the particular thing is exactly opposite to what the direction it actually is. To maximize this pulse wave Doppler, we need to select a view which is closest to the particular sample volume which we need. We have to select a low transmitted frequency, or we have to set a baseline on the spectral display to provide the greatest range of velocities in the direction of interest. What this means is, in the previous image, we had seen that there was a wraparound. So we can change the baseline. We shift the baseline to the top so that in the direction of interest, we get the entire spectral display. To overcome the limitations of pulse wave Doppler, we use the continuous wave Doppler, which can be used to assess very high velocities also. It uses two separate crystals to emit and receive, so it can measure even velocities more than 7 meters per second. It does not have any sample volume, so the highest velocity in the entire beam path is measured. Instead of clear envelope, which was seen in pulse wave Doppler, in case of continuous wave Doppler, we see a shaded area with multitude of velocities displayed, and usually the maximum velocity is measured in a continuous wave Doppler. Lastly, we come to color flow mapping, which is a dramatic display of blood flow and cardiac anatomy. It combines 2D imaging along with pulse wave Doppler, and this is color coded and superimposed as one image. So this is how color flow mapping looks like. There is a color code based on blue and red. So any flow which is away from the ultrasound transducer is denoted by blue, and anything which is towards is denoted red by using, we can use the symbol as BART. And since the pulse wave Doppler is technology is used in this, this is also susceptible to aliasing. So only a limited frequency or velocity can be used based in color flow mapping. Hence, this is used only to identify the abnormality, which is later interrogated in detail using either pulse wave or continuous wave Doppler. So coming to the end of this presentation, so the take home message is that in case of 2D imaging, we have to basically find a window so that we orient the beam perpendicular and closest to the particular structure of interest. We need to use focusing to get a narrow beam and focus on the particular structure. 2D mode is usually used for anatomy and lateral motion, and M mode is used for axial motion and timing. In case of Doppler beam, it is exactly opposite to 2D. We have to use a beam, a view in which the Doppler beam lies exact parallel to the blood flow, which we need to calculate. We can use pulse wave Doppler for low velocities, sample the volume closest to the transducer, and set the baseline accordingly so that there is no wraparound. Use color continuous wave Doppler for higher velocities and color flow mapping to identify a flow abnormality. These are my references. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sushmit, for that excellent presentation of physics involved in echocardiography. It was very well done. All the important points were covered. To highlight some of the important points, we learned that wavelength is inversely proportional to the frequency, and the speed of ultrasound is about 1540 meters per second in soft tissues, human soft tissues, and the ultrasound is reflected, refracted, or scattered or attenuated as it passes through the human tissues. And there were two important paradoxes which were mentioned. One is that regarding the ultrasound being perpendicular for good 2D imaging, whereas for Doppler it has to be parallel. This is a paradox. The second paradox is that the higher the frequency, greater is the resolution for a 2D imaging, but for Doppler ultrasound, we need a lower frequency. And Sushmit also mentioned about resolution, axial, lateral, elevational, and temporal. And he did mention about the modes, basic modes which are used is clinical settings, the M mode, where we want to time accurately the structures which are moving. Then we have the 2D echocardiography, where we use it to identify the morphology and abnormalities in morphology. And we have the Doppler echocardiography, which is mostly used for physiological function of the heart, especially in terms of blood flow, velocity, and direction of flow. And in the Doppler, we have the pulse wave for low velocities, continuous wave for high velocities, color flow Doppler, and also we should make a mention of tissue Doppler, where we are looking at the motion of the tissues rather than the blood. So with this, I will request Sanjeevani and Dr. Prabhu Shankar to make some comments, and then if there are any questions, please feel unmute and ask the question. Dr. Sanjeevani is there?
Yes, Dr. Muralidhar.
Yeah, any comments you want to make?
Sushmit has beautifully covered this difficult topic and important. Yes. Based on this physics only, we can diagnose and treat these patients, So this is very, very important. One has to learn this. There is no doubt about it. And secondly, you have concluded it so beautifully that I have only few comments. Like one is, I would like to reiterate that parallel beam in Doppler is very important to diagnose the severity of aortic stenosis.
Right,
because
right.
You can just underdiagnose or overdiagnose it and mistreat it. Second example of this is when 2D beam has to be perpendicular.
Correct.
And best example is in transthoracic echo when the 2D beam is parallel to the interatrial septum. There is a dropout, and many times even now many good people have misdiagnosed it as an ASD.
Right,
So
right.
it has to go to subcostal view and make it perpendicular. These two are
Yes.
very important things. Another most important thing is, Sushmit, you told about Nichols method of
Yes, ma'am.
fraction.
Yes, ma'am.
Now it is not at all valid, okay,
Yes.
because it is based on M mode one, number one. Number two, if there are any regional motion abnormalities, it will just. So the best method is either visual or your Simpson's modified Simpson's method.
Yes.
Third thing, you have shown very good example of temporal resolution of aortic valve visualization. And
Yes.
another important thing which is very simple but important is how to adjust gain. Very in a simple way they have explained that you see the background noise and just
Yeah.
reduce it of that. This
Yes.
is colloquially known as dial eject. It is a concept known as dial eject.
Yes.
Another important thing is about depth. LV cavity is best seen transthoracic. So when you suspect any LV thrombus, no need to go for transesophageal. That is a very good suggestion that we jump. Yes, we will do transesophageal echo now to diagnose. No, because transthoracic gives you good LV cavity as compared to transesophageal because it is nearer left atrium. And any left atrial abnormality, of course, you have to go to transesophageal. And that's it. Very good. Thank you, Dr. Muralidhar, for this opportunity. And I enjoyed it.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us. And we have a session on blood conservation on Thursday afternoon around 6 p.m. And next Sunday, we'll again have another echocardiography topic. And there is one chat box question about how to set the optimal Doppler. Can you answer that question, Dr. Sushmit? Optimal Doppler, that's what is asked.
So in case of optimal Doppler, the main thing is, first of all, we have to align it parallel to the view, parallel to the flow. So depending on which valve or which structure we are interrogating, we have to select a view such that the beam is exactly parallel to that particular structure.
Right. Right.
And based on whether it is a high velocity or a low velocity, we have to select whether it is pulse wave Doppler or continuous wave Doppler. If it is a turbulent flow with a very high velocity, then we have to use continuous wave Doppler.
Yes, yes, that's right.
So in case
I
of,
agree with what you said. Yes.
yes, sir.
And Dr. Prabhu Shankar, are you there? Dr. Prabhu Shankar, do you want to say anything? Dr. Prabhu Shankar is the president of the FCA in Bangalore.
Can I add, Dr. Muralidhar, one
Yes,
more
yes, you
point?
can.
See, about this optimal Doppler optimization, Sushmit has beautifully explained audible broadcast.
Yes,
You
yes.
try different, let us take example of aortic stenosis. Take aortic valve velocity, at least in transthoracic, from different views. Bi-chamber view, subcostal view, and many other views. And then you see where you get maximum this velocity profile. And you hear that noise, and certainly he has shown beautifully how severe aortic stenosis makes big noise. So that is optimization of Doppler.
Yes, yes. And also you may use color Doppler to identify where the turbulence is there and keep the Doppler beam at that point.
Yes, yes.
Yes. How to set correct aliasing is another question. Sushmit, can you answer how to set correct aliasing?
So aliasing, so to improve aliasing, in case of pulse wave Doppler, we have to set the baseline. If aliasing is occurring and we still want to calculate it, then we have to set the baseline such that in that particular direction where we want to calculate the blood flow, So we increase the baseline in that particular direction. And or if this question is regarding PISA, how to exactly set the Nyquist limit while interrogating using that, then we have to keep on decreasing the frequency when the aliasing exactly occurs, when the direction changes from one direction to the other. At that point, we get the actual Nyquist for the PISA calculation. So I didn't get the question whether it is in a not in a while doing
How
PISA.
to reduce aliasing? You can interpret how to reduce aliasing, because aliasing is a problem for us. So how to reduce it?
Yes, sir.
What
So
are the
as long as we are using pulse wave Doppler, the Nyquist limit will always remain a limitation to us. Any velocity which is above that will be ambiguous and we'll not be able to calculate that. But
Can you reduce it by decreasing the sector width and increasing the frequency?
Yes, sir. By increasing the frequency and by setting the baseline as to in which direction we want it, can decrease aliasing.
Yeah. One more question is how to optimize gain. That
So
is the question asked.
Yes, sir. So according to as shown in the slide, the gain should not be very low and it should not be very high also. It should be just optimum.
Correct.
So that in the grayscale, it comes as a slightly less, means the brightness is the brighter structures are seen as white and the lower amplitude structures are seen as light gray. So as already mentioned, decreasing the ambient light helps us to set a better gain, because if there is a lot of light around you, we tend to set a higher gain setting.
Yes.
So if we reduce the light in the room and then we set the gain exactly, which is neither the image appears neither too haze nor too dark nor hazy, then I think that is the correct gain setting for that particular image.
In aortic stenosis, calcific aortic stenosis, when you do the planimetry, the aortic valve area is always underestimated because of this bright calcium specks on the aortic valve. So do you recommend that we should reduce the gain there to get a better aortic valve area by planimetry?
We can reduce it very optimum, sir, but reducing it too much, we will lose even the other. We might use the other finer structures which will be missed when we decrease the gain too less.
Yes. I think one more question is, in anatomical M mode, how much angulation correction is acceptable? The question is, in anatomical M mode, how much angulation correction is acceptable?
I'm not sure about this.
No, this in M mode, we are just doing the eye spec. You are just analyzing the structures.
There's no angle involved in M mode.
Beam, and it is mostly used for temporal resolution purposes, where you want to know the accurate and precise movement of structures, especially valve leaflets and vegetations. The frame rate is very high, about 1000 or more than 1000 per second. So it is quickly cutting the tissue, in this case it is the heart. It is cutting the tissue at over 1000, more than 1000 times a second. Just imagine that the ultra beam is so capable to cut the structures in a quick fashion to give us the accurate movement of the moving structures in the heart. Usually the structure is perpendicular. It's not. It is not what do you call parallel. How do you optimize gain in color Doppler? Another question, last one, I think. Now 9:45, we should close this. This will be the last question. How do you optimize gain in color Doppler? Can you answer that one?
In case of color Doppler, we have to along the color, according to the color range, we need to set the gain such that we are not crossing the
Can I say, Dr. Muralidhar? Can I?
Yes, you can say.
Again, this is the background noise dial-a-jet concept that you have to increase the color gain, see all the speckles and colorful things in the background, and then try to reduce it gradually until you see only 1 or 2 speckles in the background. That's it. That is the correct color gain.
The rule of thumb is to keep the color gain between -50 to +50 in usual color Doppler, 50 or 60 around that range, and reduce it when you want to see at very low velocity color flows. For example, in ASD or when the velocity is very low, you can reduce the color gain. But normally the color gain settings is about 50 to 60 centimeters per second. Do you agree with that, Sushmit and Sanjeevani?
Yes,
sir.
Dr. Muralidhar, again during pulmonary vein analysis, there also you
Yes.
have to reduce it.
Yes.
Just like that in pulmonary veins also.
Yes.
Otherwise, you will see tremendous turbulence. The simple thing is, if you see too much turbulence, try to reduce it and make it what this is soft colors.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt in between, sir. Actually, Dr. Vinay Deshurkar and Jigisha ma'am have raised their hand.
Yeah. Please ask them to ask what they want to say.
Dr.
Dr.
Jigisha
Vinayak Deshurkar?
and Dr. Jigisha.
Yeah. Please
Excellent
unmute them, no?
Yeah, excellent presentation, sir. And
Thank you.
Muralidhar sir, congratulations for arranging such a good sessions for the students.
Thank you.
Only thing I want to share is for coronary, as Sanjuni ma'am said, for pulmonary vein, students should know coronary artery flow also. You need the reduce the gain to -20,
Right.
so you get
Right.
better coronary color flow.
Right. Thank you for that. Thank you for that point. Dr. Vinayak Desurkar is there?
Yes, sir. Dr. Vinayak Deshurkar sir is there.
Dr. Vinayak, do you want to say something? Dr. Desurkar, do you want to say something?
Deshurkar sir is not available,
Can you
sir.
hear now?
Yes, sir.
Can you hear now? Yeah.
Yes.
Right. For Doppler, you should be in line with the flow, not only parallel. There's no point in being a parallel. You should be in the line of it.
Yes.
That's why you are at zero angle. You can be in line at a different angle. And I think the question for M mode about angle, what Dr. Murli had said, there is nothing like an angle in M mode. It's probably the person wanted to ask about how should be the angle in the Doppler. So the cos of the theta up to 20, that's what we accept. Anatomical angle correct or angulation correction is still a debatable issue. So nobody is taking the numbers from that, the flow what you derive from that.
Right.
How to set up a gain? In case of that M mode, the angle is an important aspect if you are going to measure the dimensions. So if you are going to measure the dimensions, you should be exactly at perpendicular to the place where you want to measure the dimension. Otherwise, with the angulation, you are going to get wrong calculations. That's why that angle is important. And for gain setting, for color gain, I think there are two different issues. One is a velocity and another is a gain. So if you set a low velocity and try to measure a high velocity flow, there is to be a lot of variance you are going to see. But gain is a different issue. Gain is what? When you initially start and if you start increasing the color gain, the moment you start seeing the stars, that means that is the optimum gain. If you go beyond that, you will see more stars without any movement along the transition. So that's the optimum color gain setting what you can do at that point. And the same is true for 2D, that black things, you know that blood is black. So black things in the heart should appear black if you have set the gain correctly. If you see white thing in the heart, in the normal heart, that means the gain is too high. And rest of the things Sushmit has made up absolutely clear that the light adjustments and other things also make a lot of difference.
Yes.
Anyway, thanks, Dr. Murli. It's a nice initiative and excellent presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Vinayak. Your presence is valuable to us. Please join and contribute to our furtherment of the knowledge and patient benefit. Thank you very much. And I think I should close it now because we have crossed the time limit of 9:45. You should also have a good Sunday. So I will close this session and we'll meet again on 28th for blood conservation on next Sunday for TE session. Thank you once again. Thank you, Sanjeevani, and everybody else who have participated and made this successful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all the faculties for their presence. Thank you very much, and for the attendees also, those who attended the class. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.